Hey everybody, MS Farzan here, and welcome to episode 3 of Building a Tabletop Role-Playing Game. In this episode, I'd like to talk to you about our very first alpha playtest for Entromancy, the role-playing game. We had the first playtest last weekend, and it was a really wonderful experience to expose a new group of people to the core rule set of the Entromancy role-playing game. I can definitely say that it was a nervous experience, and it's always a nervous experience when you're exposing a new group of people to some work that you've been doing for quite a long time. And the thing that stands out to me the most is how awesome playtesting is to expose things that you've never thought about when you're building your own role-playing game. So up to that point, we've done playtesting in a very general sense, meaning we've made balance changes based on what we think is going to work in combat. We've pulled levers here and there when it comes to different classes that we have and different skills that we have and different feats and spells that we have, saying that this seems overpowered and this seems underpowered, or this doesn't seem like it would work at all. This skill doesn't seem like it would be fun. This spell seems like it's only situationally dependent, so it costs too much to cast this spell. And we have our alpha build that we've been revising and getting it to a point where we have felt like, okay, now it's time to actually take it into a game session, and rather than just sending it around to people that we trust for their feedback, let's actually get people to sit around a table and role play and play an entire encounter in the Entromancy world. And see what happens, and roll dice and see if the game's fun, see if the game's totally broken, see if we can break the game, see if we can get feedback about things that we haven't even considered. And of all of those things that I just mentioned, I don't think we broke the game. I don't think we broke much within the game. And the game, to be quite honest, seems to have an elasticity that allows for a lot of room for role-playing, for combat, for very specific things that are very specific to the cyberpunk setting, like hacking and riding around in vehicles and like firing lasers at people. But the two things that stood out to me most are, yes, the game seems to be fun. People are having fun playing it, which is awesome. That's something that is more difficult to solve for than issues like this class seems underpowered, or this spell seems like it's useless. And the second thing that stood out to me is that, wow, there are a lot of specifics when you're writing rules for a game that are not exposed until you start actually playing them. Here's an example. We have hacking in our game, and hacking is a skill like any other skill that you would see in a role-playing game like Perception in Dungeons & Dragons, or Survival, or something like that. And we have spells and feats that deal with hacking in very specific contexts, where some of the classes are better at hacking, or maybe they can cast spells that augment their hacking, and will allow you to, let's say, hack a drone in combat using that spell. But we also have hacking outside of combat that has its own set of rules, or its own use case scenarios. What we didn't realize is that players might also try to do hacking within combat, and that needs its own specific set of rules, because you might have a minute or 2 minutes or an hour to hack something, let's say to hack a security turret, when you're not actually in combat with the turret. But what if you're in combat with the turret? How does hacking work then? Do you have to only cast a spell that deals with hacking, or do you have to use a feat, or how does that actually work if you don't have a feat or a talent, but you're still trying to use your hacking skill in combat? So that's the first thing that we've had to address and build out rules for that and make it absolutely crystal clear without making it overly complex. Another example is we haven't really figured out what happens if one of the party members or their pets get taken out in combat. We don't actually have like incapacitation rules. So that stood out as something like, oh, we need to do this right away. Or we've done a lot of, I want to call it theory crafting, about how different characters and character classes could perform in combat, making sure that the ranged combatants are viable and the spellcasters are cool and that they provide an extra dimension to the team, and that melee characters get what they're paying for in terms of feats and skills. But we noticed that, like in many other role-playing games, ranged combat pretty much outstrips everything else, and we have to incentivize our melee characters to get into combat quicker and to feel like they're just as powerful as everyone else when they're in combat. So a lot of these things came up and would not have come up if we hadn't done that playtest. I'm very, very glad that the most important aspect is that people seem to have fun, and we're able to provide really constructive feedback for us to move forward with our next playtest and our iteration of the game. But the thing that has stood out to me, having worked in the video games industry a long time and having played role-playing games and DM role-playing games for years, is that no matter how much you work on something that is not your own, it's not until you create something of your own that you really understand the importance of the different stages of game development or the different processes that are at work in whatever industry that you're working in. So I've always known that playtesting is important as a gamer and as someone who's playtested games and as someone who's worked on video games. But now that it's my own project, it stands out as even more important. I've had the good fortune of being in a public-facing writing role for a long time, and people have critiqued my novels, my articles when I worked as a journalist, the content that I put up in the companies that I've worked for. So I've developed a little bit of a thick skin, and I want more feedback that is critical feedback as well as constructive feedback, but really honest and objective feedback. And this is one of those cases in which the game is still in a very early stage. We're almost feature complete with the game, and that's why I call it an alpha build. And we're building a preview version of the game that will have a limited rule set, a couple of classes, a couple of races for all of you and all of us to check out, and it's coming this summer. And I want that version of the game to feel really tight and really workable, even though it's just a preview version of the game, and we're going to continue to iterate on it and continue to play test all of the other stuff that's already in the game, while building out the content so that we can have a content complete or a beta version of the game that we can start doing a Kickstarter for later this year. And the Kickstarter will deal with more things like how do we pay for art and final design and layout, and maybe get some fun extras like the hacking card game that I've talked about in previous videos, or maybe custom dice or that sort of thing. But by the time we get to the Kickstarter and have a really strong beta version of the game, I want all of the stuff to be play tested. I want all of the classes to be play tested, the prestige classes that we have, which are called destinies. I want everything to have a really good internal consistency and have as much feedback as we can so that it feels really strong. And the first step is playtesting this alpha build. And I'm learning that the only way to get objective feedback is to have as many people try and break your game as possible and tell you what they like about the game, tell you what they don't like about the game. That might even be more important. And find the line in between where the things that they're not telling you, whether good or bad, inform you about the design decisions that you've made or that you will make moving forward. Now, the important caveat is that we've only had one really big playtest so far that happened last weekend. We're going to do many more of these because the feedback from one group, although it's been really, really positive and interesting and constructive and critical and useful, that's only one group giving us feedback. I want to have more and more people give us feedback. And if you're interested in this, please let me know. You can either comment or go to the Entromancy website at entromancy.com and sign up, and we can see if we can include you in one of these playtests, because I really want to get more objective feedback from all different types of players, new players, veteran players, cyberpunk players, fantasy players, people who have no interest in role-playing games, because I want to make sure that we're covering our bases, and by the time the preview edition comes out and by the time the final version of the game comes out, it feels really solid, and it feels like we've taken into account as many people's feedback as we can so that we make the best game that we possibly can. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter for more crunchy content.